Thank you for joining me today. We're going to talk about how to build a winning strategy for Facebook and Instagram. Before I get started with today's presentation, a little bit about me. My name is Menachem, and I've been in online marketing for about 2 decades now. I launched my first Facebook campaigns in the OG days of 2014. And let me tell you, it's been a wild ride. Today, we'll talk about building for success for now and the future, working in an automated world. Most of the ad platforms have been moving towards more algorithmic campaigns, and the environment today is very different than how it's been in the past. When you're advertising on a platform like Google, you're limited to advertising towards whoever is searching for your product or service. The beauty of social media is that the possibilities are endless. The sheer potential of scale is immense. As some of you may know, my background is in Google Ads. So I come at Facebook ads a little bit differently than most. My brain is a little bit googly. There are similarities between Google and Meta. Both, as I mentioned, are pushing towards automation with fewer levers and less controls. We're moving to a world where campaigns are more algorithmically driven, as you see with Facebook, Meta, Advantage Plus shopping, and Google's Performance Max. You can't really see and you can't really control certain components of the campaign. And the biggest levers are now becoming more about the creative messaging, landing pages, and overall algorithmic targeting. But in reality, the two platforms couldn't be more different. So with that being said, think about the state of the user's mind when they're searching for something. You're on Google, you're searching for something, they want to research, they want to buy. Now, as compared to the user's state of mind when they're browsing social media, scrolling endlessly, looking to be entertained. On paid social, you can create demand, not just capture it. Whereas on Google, you're capturing existing demand. Somebody's searching for the product or service, but it's finite. There's only a certain amount of searches happening for a specific keyword. Whereas on paid social, you can educate consumers a little higher up in the funnel, create demand, and then capture it later on. So how does paid social fit into your marketing mix? Should you spend more on Google or Meta? And this is a question that I get quite often. I'm sure many of you have thought about this. A lot of it, I'd say, depends on the nature of your business. Can you generate leads with Meta ads? Yes. But the lead quality is likely going to be poorer than Google. And I'll cover some tips today to combat that. For e-commerce businesses, do you sell your own brand product? If yes, Meta will likely work well for you. If you're selling more commoditized products, think of consumer electronics, appliances, you typically lead with Google. In those cases, Meta can work for you, but it will be different. At the same time, or at least in our experience, what I've found, it's best to be platform agnostic, run campaigns across all channels. And this gives you multiple sources of revenue, and diversification is always a good thing. And this increases your ability to create demand and influence consumers at all stages of the funnel. So let's get into it. How is lead gen different than e-commerce? If you look around, there are a lot of resources for e-commerce on Meta advertising. And I'll share some tips and tricks on that stuff today. But it's important to note that advertising on Facebook and Instagram through Meta ads can work well for generating leads too, both on the consumer side and on the B2B side. We've seen success across many different verticals, but it does require specifically thought out strategies to ensure that your message is reaching the right consumer and that it converts to quality leads. The last thing you want is to generate leads that you can't sell to. Ultimately, a lead is only worth something if it can turn into revenue. So the tricky piece with running lead gen campaigns on Facebook ads is you're going to get a lot of spam leads because it's much more common. It's much easier. The system is optimizing towards form submissions as opposed to e-commerce, where it's seeing actual revenue come in real time, and it's able to optimize towards that. So sometimes you might get more leads, but they're junkier quality. That doesn't help you. So the tricky piece is, how do you get better quality leads, even if that means fewer submissions through your forms? This is something that you always want to try and balance. Remember that leads are not sales. You can't deposit leads in your bank account. And so it's super important to figure out how to get good quality leads from the platform. So those are the challenges. How do we solve for this? I'm going to start off with our framework for lead gen campaigns, and after that, I'll talk a bit about e-commerce as well. So first and foremost, what kind of campaign objective should you use? One thing is for sure, everything that we've seen is that the meta algorithm is very powerful. It's going to give you whatever you ask for. If you run a traffic focused campaign, it's going to send you traffic. Again, traffic doesn't convert to leads necessarily. So in order to sell, you need inbound inquiries, you need leads. And in order to do that, we recommend using always a conversion focused campaign, specifically focused to driving leads based off of your pixel tracking. And as you're building your campaign, jumping into the ad set settings, you can create one-off ads or use dynamic creative, which is similar to responsive search ads on the Google side for those that are familiar. The way it works is you're going to provide a list of ad copy and ad creative, including images, videos, and the system will then mix and match and personalize the ad for each individual user. What we found is that this is great for small budgets, especially on lead gen campaigns, because you don't necessarily have enough data to optimize towards specific ads. So this allows the system to algorithmically target. Typically, you do want to test different types of targeting, different types of ad creative, but we found this to work well for smaller lead generation campaigns. Next, again, we've established that the pixel is very powerful, and I'm definitely a big fan of pixel-based targeting, allowing the system to target whoever it wants based on the data it collects on who converts on your website. But something very interesting that we found for lead gen campaigns, especially on newer accounts or minimal accounts, is that custom audiences can work well. I know that with e-commerce, broad targeting is typically the go-to, but for lead generation campaigns, we found that leaning into lookalikes of your existing customers, so uploading an Excel list of your customer base, or even just your qualified leads, uploading that to the platform so that it can target people who are similar to those, can work very well for lead gen campaigns. And additionally, we found both on the consumer and B2B side that interest-based audiences can work very well, telling the system that people who are interested in X or belong to specific demographics are likely the potential consumer for you. And also, it's a good idea to allow the system to use Advantage Plus targeting, where basically it expands outside of your audiences an additional 20% or so to find users who may not be in the specific audiences you set up, to find additional users that way. So again, unlike e-commerce where the system can see the revenue coming in real time, sometimes you need a bit more of a signal, and this helps with lead quality because your ads are being shown to more interested users. One thing that I see is that advertisers often try to manually control the placements of where the ads get displayed. Again, the algorithm is very powerful, so just don't bother. Allow the system to show the ads wherever it wants, on Facebook, Instagram, Messenger, in the news feed, in the stories, on the right sidebar. Just let the system kind of go crazy. It will regulate to wherever conversions are coming from. Let the algorithm do that heavy lifting and find the potential customers for you. What we've learned is that this holds true across most ad platforms today. And additionally, something to keep in mind is that when you limit your exposure with manual adjustments, you end up increasing your costs and you lose out on untapped potential. So you've defined who's going to see your ad. Now, what's your message? We see a lot of e-commerce folks focus on video creative, and that definitely works well. I think that the surprising thing is that image ads work really well for lead gen. Now, video ads work well too, but let's be real, it's much harder to get good videos, especially for a lead gen campaign. Remember that you can use plain images, like the example on the left, or overlaying text onto an image, create banner ads. These tend to work well because remember, your audiences are a bit broad, and the messaging on your image ad or the copy below it tends to work as a form of targeting as well. But once the user clicks, where do they go and what do they see? I think this is a more specific question on the lead gen side as opposed to e-commerce. Do you want to send them to your homepage, a dedicated landing page, or even utilizing embedded Facebook forms? And what's the difference and why should you care? That's the question I would ask. And so what we've seen is that sending the user to a landing page, since it requires more effort from the consumer, they've got to click, wait for the page to load, fill out a form manually. You're likely going to get less leads than if you use an embedded form, but the leads will be better quality because the ones that were going to be more spam are less likely to fill out that form through that extra effort. Embedded forms on Facebook and Instagram are pre-populated with the user's Instagram or Facebook account information. So it'll have their name, email, and so on. And that creates the form to be a lot easier to fill out. If you're going to go that route, I would recommend adding an additional question to sort of forcefully add friction to the process so that fewer people accidentally fill out the form, and you'll end up with slightly better quality leads. And again, remembering that leads are not sales, it's important to track the source of each lead. You can append UTM parameters to all your ads so that you can see in real time as the leads come in, which campaign, which ad set, which ad creative that specific lead came from. And over time, you can establish patterns by looking in your CRM. I have an example here showing a breakdown of 30 leads that came in through a specific campaign and what the current status of them is now. And you can start to isolate this data, analyze it, and see where the good conversions are coming from. This will tell you if certain creative is working well, resonating well with your consumers, or if there are certain audiences that are working better for you. Here's another example on the ad set level. We tested a few different audiences and landing pages. You could see here that the lookalike audience with an embedded lead form and dynamic creative was a winner, bringing us a cheaper cost per lead across the board and at fairly similar volume. So you can do something similar in your campaigns to figure out what works best for your business. So that's all on the lead gen side. There are some similarities, but how is e-commerce different? So for starters, the system automatically tracks revenue, as I mentioned, which makes our job easier because a lead might not be a sale. With e-commerce, when it tracks revenue, it's typically revenue, unless you're in an industry with a high amount of fraud. That's something that you've got to think about. But typically, it's tracking revenue in real time. And because of that, it's able to assign a dollar value to each order as it comes in. And it ultimately makes it easier to align with profit-centric optimization. You're no longer trying to figure out what's actually driving your revenue. You see that in real time. I think something important to note is that a lot of D2C operators use meta ads and email as their marketing mix, but no more. I would just say that e-commerce doesn't have to be purely transactional. You can lean into other campaigns on the Google side, like Performance Max, Demand Gen, YouTube, capturing additional demand that way. But with all that being said, today I'm going to talk about some tips and tricks for Facebook ads on e-commerce. And again, e-commerce could be easier than lead gen, but what do you do? How should you do it? Let's jump into it. So as I mentioned, unlike lead gen campaigns where you only have the option of running conversion focused campaigns, with e-commerce, you have the option to try a new campaign type called Advantage Plus Shopping. Facebook has been rolling this out over the past year or so. And so what is Advantage Plus shopping? What we've seen is that it's a very similar approach to Performance Max from Google, in that Advantage Plus shopping campaigns are much more automated. It's more of a broad campaign type. It has fewer controls, and it's more algorithmic in nature than a standard conversion purchase optimized campaign. So should you use Advantage Plus shopping? Should you use a conversion campaign and focus on purchases? What we've found is that you do want to try both and see how it goes. For some of our clients, Advantage Plus shopping typically performs better. For others, we find that standard purchase conversion campaigns work better. And in others, we'll find a mixture of both running side by side for different products or promotions. So with broad targeting, we typically find with e-commerce campaigns, again, because the system is able to see the revenue in real time, go crazy. Let the system target whoever it wants. Just exclude recent purchasers, maybe people who purchased from you in the last 30 days or so, depending on the nature of your product. Any additional limitations that you give the system in terms of audience typically will artificially inflate the CPMs. So it's better to kind of go broad, let the system target based on who it believes is most likely to purchase. And as we've seen, and as I've mentioned, the meta algorithm is very powerful. So just lean into it. Again, as I mentioned on the lead gen side, the system will give you what you ask for. Too many times I've logged into an account to run an audit or look at a campaign, and you see that, you know, the brand or the agency is running a campaign focusing on add to carts or clicks. And again, that algorithm is super powerful. If you tell it you want clicks, you're going to get clicks, but they typically don't convert to sales. So if you're going to run a conversions campaign, make sure you're focusing on purchases very specifically, because you want purchases. At the end of the day, we need revenue, and so make sure to focus on that. Now, regarding attribution, unlike lead gen, where one day is typically enough, somebody lands on the page to fill out the form, you're not asking for a lot. With e-commerce, yes, there are products that are more of an impulse purchase, but typically we recommend leaning into 7-day click attribution, because the system needs time. The user has to go through the full purchase journey. They click on the ad today, they might not be ready to buy today. And so you want to be able to get a better, clearer picture of who's seeing your ads. We typically do not recommend targeting or attributing on 1-day view attribution, because if you think about it, everybody's on Facebook and everybody's on Instagram, and they're going to see your ads. So what ends up happening is it overinflates the attribution, and there's definitely value to the view through component of your ads, but I wouldn't rely on that data, and will likely have a lot more double attribution if you include view through conversion. So again, typically we recommend using 7-day click attribution, unless you're selling very much like an impulse purchase. In those cases, the 1-day click should be enough. So now we jump into creative. Again, like what works, what doesn't work. As with everything else in online marketing, you want to test everything, try everything. You can use image ads, video ads, carousel ads, and in each of those, you can run a lot of different types of ads. For images, you can create product shots, lifestyle product shots, us versus them. You can showcase media mentions, logos of different media outlets that maybe featured your product, customer reviews, and so on. You know, with videos, you can do a lot of the same. You can also do high production video. You can do UGC or influencer style videos, customer testimonials, short form, long form, and so on. And then with carousels, you can run dynamic catalog ads. There's really a lot you can do, and there's no easy answer. Again, you want to test everything and see what works for your brand. What works for one doesn't necessarily work for the next. And so kind of on that same topic of creative assets, people often ask, you know, how often should I try new creative? How much should I spend to test a new ad? And my approach is a little bit less about time and how much and budget. It's more about how much traffic has flowed through the specific ad. Ideally you want hundreds or a couple of thousand clicks to go through an ad to establish statistical significance so that you know that you can rely on the data. If you only had a couple of clicks or a couple of orders, it's very hard to know whether that will actually work at some level of scale. And so with all that, creative testing, how do you keep track of what's working? The answer to that is with consistent ad naming conventions, and this is super important. This way you can easily filter out and report how well your ads are doing. If you name your ads properly, dating everything, you put the asset type, destination, call to action, and so on, you can very easily filter your ads and say, okay, how are my image ads compared to video ads? Do review ads do well? Or maybe you see better results from an influencer campaign or a specific call to action versus another. And so it's really important to name your ads consistently so you can easily pull this data. So here's an example of some creative testing that we've done for a brand. Some image ads, some videos, different variations. You start to find a clear winner. As you're testing different things, you start to see certain ads are able to get you a better return on ad spend, but also at another level of scale. And this is really what you're looking for as you run your tests. So let's recap. Again, when you're running a lead gen campaign, make sure to do what you can to limit spam, get your targeting right, more of an emphasis on the offer and the messaging. With e-commerce, you want to try to step back, allow the system to do a bit more of that targeting and focus more on the creative component, testing properly. But ultimately, both Facebook and Instagram are solid additions to whatever you're doing in marketing. But I do highly recommend layering that on top of everything else you're doing holistically. So everything we've talked about today, we're kind of understanding that the ad platforms are getting a lot more sophisticated and algorithmic in nature. And our job is now learning when to let go and let the system do the heavy lifting, and when we need to lean in and do better. I'd love to continue this conversation with you online. You can find me on Twitter and take it from there. But thank you again for joining me today. See you at the next SMX.
Please take a moment to rate this session, then click the Overtime button in the Dig Deeper tab to join us for a live Q&A.